Okay, a lot to unpack here. First of all, Castelian, also known as Nebulous, Tower Toppler, and Sublime, not Sublime like the band, but Sublime with an N for not a word, was adapted by a company called Trifix, who I have never ever heard of. According to their Wikipedia, they made 2 more games for Super Nintendo, and that's it. I never looked at the cover art too closely, so I just thought this was some Knight Saves the Princess medieval adventure. If I'd examined the game a little closer, I would have seen that the protagonist is actually a weird half-frog, half-pig Q-Bert knockoff named Pogo. You guide Pogo up a glowing tower which rotates as you move. It's a pretty great mechanic for an 8-bit title, and I can't think of any other game that uses this other than maybe Kirby's Adventure, which is solid company to keep. Then there's the game itself. Your goal is to make it up the tower while avoiding floating eyes, bouncing balls, and something that looks like the model of a molecule. You have a bullet of some sort that works on some enemies and not others. That same button also jumps, but only if you're pushing right or left. No idea why they couldn't make B shoot and A jump, but without fail, you're going to be trying to shoot an enemy and inevitably jump right into them like a total dum-dum. Seriously, I cannot emphasize enough how stupid this is. What other game can you think of on the NES where jump and shoot are one button and the other does absolutely nothing? What the fuck? The game looks... I don't really know. As I mentioned earlier, the rotating tower is pretty impressive. And while the sprites aren't gonna make great perler bead projects or anything, they are at least better looking than the early NES games like, say, Chubby Cherub. The thing that stands out the most to me though is the color palette. It seems overly monochromatic. We didn't really get this home computer system in the States, but in the UK they had the ZX Spectrum, or ZX Spectrum to be Anglo-precise. The ZX Spectrum had a super limited color range, and so a lot of the games were mostly in the CMYK-esque palette. Castelian was ported to that system, so it makes me think that they were just making a few tweaks to get it ready for the NES. This blue atomic model thing here, the worst. At first I thought it was like the Ghost Whale and Bubble Bobble, and that I was taking too long, so I started hurrying up, only to realize it just appears randomly regardless of what I do. Sometimes it speeds off in the opposite direction, sometimes it comes straight at you with T-1000-like intensity. This game is already incredibly hard and frustrating for a number of reasons, but this indestructible particle completely disrupts any attempt you might make to rationally work your way up the tower. There is no music, only the cold silence of the tower, followed by the constant repeating thud of the ball enemy bouncing up and down. It reminds me of the Simpsons episode where the kids have to wear uniforms that in turn crush their spirits into conformity. There are other levels than just the first one I keep showing. They're just harder versions of the same thing, but with slightly different colors and slight changes to the sprite designs. They all have super rad names like The Realm of Robots and The Trap of Tricks, but clearly the designers put all their creativity into those titles instead of into the game itself. There's also these extra stages between levels where you collect candy gems in a side-scrolling perspective. It's pretty boring. And it's honestly more of a hindrance than a bonus. The controls, oh boy. I already mentioned the awful and useless shooting mechanic, but the movement and jumping aren't much better. It's sort of a stilted press left and a second later the pig moves delay kind of game. There's a lot of platforming jumps that are expected of you, but despite this game's simplicity, judging your distances is way harder than it should be. Not only that, but every level is full of intentional gotcha style death traps that are completely unavoidable the first time you play. So even when you feel like you're finally getting the hang of it, the game punishes you for your commitment with further masochism. When you get hit, you don't die, you just spin slowly back down the tower, sometimes one level, and sometimes all the way back to the beginning. It's unclear why this doesn't just kill you, because Castelian is timed. So when you fall to the bottom of the stage, the game doesn't give you enough time to get back to the top before you die from lack of seconds. You might as well just take a break, grab a beer, and then wait for the timer to run out. But while you're up, just stay a while, and then never, ever come back to Castelian. The more I play Castelian, the more this feels like a cruel thought experiment. The lack of music makes you intensely aware of your surroundings. The constant bouncing thuds slowly unlock your mind's safeguards. The single button interface reinforces your own feeble lack of control. and the frustrating, repetitive gameplay erodes at the spirit until you finally break. Buck waterboarding. Just throw this in a cell at Guantanamo and let Pogo the pig extract the prisoner's secrets.